Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And if you are joining us, because right now none of you are watching, which means that either I've posted it wrong into the blog or something. So let me check, make sure everything's working. Even though we're recording right now, I see no viewers, which is never the case. So
Wow.
let me see what's going on there.
You must have known I was on the show.
Yeah, it's probably something I posted wrong. Here we go. Let me see if I can get this right here. But you guys can talk for a second.
Okay. Mike, long time no see.
Yeah, Russ.
You guys, that's just when you guys have nothing to say to each other. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, it's funny because we were constantly bumping into each other and hung out for most of the weekend, and it was a pretty interesting time in Buffalo. I mean,
It was.
I have to say that Buffalo came off very well from people who were talking about the draft after the fact.
Yeah, they did a good job.
They did a good job. The Harbor Center is wonderful for the draft. The Pagulas put on a pretty good show. The building was good. The NHL handled everything fine, and the crowd was great on Friday night, where you had, I think, maybe yes, if there were 15,000 people, I'd say probably 5,000 of them were Leaf fans. They sort of got overwhelmed by boos from the Buffalo crowd, but they got the ultimate prize. They drafted Austin Matthews first overall, and
He seems okay.
yeah. So, well, I'm sure we're going to talk about the draft for us, but
Draft, the Hockey Hall of Fame. There's all these things.
yeah, well, I'll hold off on the Hall of Fame because I'm sure Eka's got some things on that one. But what I was a little surprised at was the lack of trades.
I mean,
And
but there still were some trades. It's hard to make trades now. That's the problem.
well, well, that's the thing. It's like even more of a complicating factor now on not only the cap. And Ek, I'm getting a little bit of an echo here. I don't know if you got the player open.
If you watched the midday show, the Sportsnet show, Jarmo Kekalainen was on and basically said he thought he had a trade done, and then it wasn't done.
Yeah, they intimated. Are you hearing the echo, Ek?
I'm not hearing the echo yet, but hold on.
As soon as I finish this, I'll log off.
Let me try that. Is it gone now? Is it better?
It's better.
All right.
He admitted it. He thought he
Well,
had.
you know what? I think it was this whole Milano trade that went down because
Yep.
there were a lot of people, and I talked to a lot of sources, and I reported it too, that right before they were about to pick, and I don't know if that meant that they were going to trade that pick to New Jersey. I kind of got that impression that something was going on, that there was a big deal in place, that where they would have sent the third pick overall to New Jersey.
Well, the thing that Kekalainen said was on the show is that they always intended to draft Dubois. So you have to figure out whatever you're thinking in your mind. It meant that they had to get Dubois.
Right.
And it sounded like it was either a trade down to number 4 with Edmonton or a trade down to number 5 Vancouver, because Vancouver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Milano was involved somehow. That's all I know we don't know for sure, but I think I reported it. I know I reported it, but what people were saying, McKenzie also reported it at the same time, roughly. And Bob McKenzie, you can say what he's one about me, but Bob McKenzie doesn't get things wrong. So, chances are something went down like that. And you're right. I mean, Dubois is something that they you would think could have traded down to get if they're from out of their spot, right? Because that was the real shocker. Although Rush, you had talked about Dubois going as high as.
I mean, it was funny. It was nice that you sent that tweet because I remembered that because of the way you framed the question, you were like, "Well, is this like a guaranteed done deal, no chance?" And then I thought, "No, there's a chance."
Yeah.
And what I thought was still what I thought, and I mentioned that I still thought that was remote thinking, but it turns out that was their thinking. So,
right.
Well, the funny thing is that, I mean, and Russ maybe had this doubt even before then, but we started having doubts about Columbus and Puljujarvi at the Combine when, somebody told us that, they were looking at players who were more center, like Logan Brown or Clayton Keller or, Dubois. Now, I think it's like, and Russ has said this before, is that after watching Dubois a few times, I think he's more of a winger than he is a center. So I don't know obviously the Blue Jackets believe that he can play up the middle, and Kekalainen said as much today, but I don't know. I think that's more of a project than anything. Let's just say this: he's not going to be the prototypical distributing center. He's going to be more of a power forward type of center who tries to score goals.
Although he's a really good passer too. I think, like I said, I think if they got him as a center and he turns out to be a really good center, it's a fantastic pick. If they got him as a winger, it's still a great pick. But then maybe Puljujarvi will be just a slightly better winger than Dubois. But if Dubois is a center and he scores like I think he's going to score anyhow, then that's a grand slam. So we'll see. I mean, either way, it's good. There were some fans that were actually upset, and I was like, "What are you upset about?" They were like, "Oh, well, we only got Dubois," and I'm like, "Really? You only got Pierre-Luc Dubois? You're upset about this?"
Yeah, I know. Montreal Canadian fans would kill for Pierre-Luc Dubois. I mean, he was all the way we're talking about in Montreal. Anyway, today is June 27th, 2016. I think we've already started the show, so I'm going to start it like that today. Because we really launched right into it, and why wouldn't we? Because we have Russ and Mike on, who are both at the draft today.
And no editing needed.
No editing needed at the draft. Well, maybe that little beginning part where you guys don't say anything to each other. That'd be good. But no, I think the whole thing is we are here at 20. It's the 2016 draft in the rearview mirror now. Free agency straight ahead of us, and many things to come. We had talked a lot, and I think before we get into the draft, which will be most of the show, I do want to discuss, Mike, what you had said, that you were a little surprised there weren't more trades during the day.
Well, I think the reason why is because not only the complicating factor of the cap, which is more and more becoming a complicating factor for teams, it's expansion now too.
Well, expansion too, and I think what we saw were the two main players in play that were sort of Fowler and Shattenkirk, who were the two main guys that you knew were going to get traded. I mean, there were some players who were out there, like Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Yakupov are the other two, I would say. So you can combine Yakupov, Nugent-Hopkins, Fowler.
I still don't know if Shattenkirk's getting traded, but anyhow, I know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm starting to question it as well, Russ, because of what I heard as far as the asking price for Shattenkirk.
Yeah.
I mean, Dylan Larkin was the asking price for Shattenkirk, and the other...
That's insulting.
It actually happened, though, and the other was the Bruins' 2 first-round draft picks. We had talked about the Bruins moving one of them, but both of them for Shattenkirk was the other. Now, that's a curious one, of course. I still think...
That's the, I don't really want to trade this player, but if you give me this price, I'll trade this player.
Well, and the only way that would make sense on the part of Boston would be if they could talk to Shattenkirk's agent and get an extension, because you're not going to trade 2 first-round picks for a guy who's going to walk at the end of next year.
But I think they were allowed to talk to Shattenkirk's agent. I heard that. For what it's worth, I heard that they would, and that, maybe that played into it. Maybe that they after talking to Shattenkirk's agent, the price was crazy high, and for that, for that return, 2 first-round draft picks, it was too much.
Well, and I'll tell you what's crazy about that. The crazy part about that is, would you get somebody now that's really good? Yes. Could McAvoy be better than Shattenkirk in 3 years? Yes. And so that's where it gets a little crazy, So that's where, does Boston really think if they have Shattenkirk, they're really competing for the Stanley Cup? Because that's, to me, you shouldn't give away 2 first-round picks like that, and they didn't. And then I think that's, I don't even know if I'd give away 1 first-round pick for Shattenkirk. I would try and do a roster player and a second-round pick, because there's no term there. You still have to sign them.
Right.
To me, it's not worth that.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. I agree with you completely. So, I mean, it tells me a couple things. I've seen this before when you have players who are priced very high at the draft and then eventually do get traded for less. That can happen, and because what's going on now is really fascinating. Is you can put those players in high. You can go for a team that's maybe desperate. Maybe the thought was Boston's so desperate they're going to make that trade, right? That there's a possibility that they're going to make that deal because they're so desperate, because they've been out there trying to get every defenseman under the sun, which everybody knew is true. Is there something weird with the sound?
Not anymore.
Okay, sorry, I thought I heard something.
I logged off and logged back on. So.
Okay. No, so you have that possibility that they could do that. Now, what happens next, though, is if you really want to move those players, you have to move them quickly. You have to move them within the next few days, because once you hit July 1st, teams start to move beyond the trade market. They start really looking at the UFA market, and they start to say, well, we can get something without giving up anything.
Well, I think normally you're right, Eck, but the thing that complicates that, or maybe it changes that factor this year, is the fact that the defensive market in terms of free agents is completely bereft. of talent. There's not a lot left. I mean, after a veteran guy like Brian Campbell, after Jason Demers, after a Luke Shen, who might be a good bottom pairing guy, there's not a lot left. So, Ben Lovejoy, I mean, there's not much there.
Well, there are players, though. I mean, I'll say, yeah, the UFA market is bereft. I agree with you, but what we're not talking about are the other tradable defensemen, which is not bereft. That there's tradable defensemen that you can get that won't cost you an arm and a leg, but they're out there, like guys like Mark Streit or players like that who exist, who are signed to contracts already, but who are movable right now. And if you really are trying to rebuild your defense, this is a great time to do it. There's a lot of defensemen who are available via trade if you want to make that move. And we've heard Tyson Barrie's not right now, but he's not for the right price right now. Perhaps I'm not completely buying that Tyson Barrie is going to be a Avalanche for life. Just because of what was said before.
But there's a reason. There's a reason that they're available. The reason that they're available is because they're older. They're making over $5 million. Right. And I'm sure Dennis Weidman is available in Calgary. But
let's not be so snobbish, though. Again, years ago when the Rangers got Kevin Kline, I hadn't seen him a lot. I thought, I don't know, is this a good deal? Maybe. It's a fantastic deal now, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
The Rangers yesterday, they got Nick Holden. He hasn't had a huge resume. He had a decent year. The Avs just cut bait with him for whatever reason. The Rangers are pretty good at developing defensemen. If he turns into something even around Kevin Kline for a fourth-round pick, and you put him in your lineup, that's a heck of a deal. So my point is, there's some of these guys that are out there that didn't get a real good chance that now on a different team could get a real good chance. And they just don't have any. There's just nothing great to say about them today because there's not a large body of work.
I totally agree with that. That's a really good point. And defensemen especially are that way. They really do slot into different spots. Kline, when he was in Nashville, was getting scratched a lot. I remember, always there was a big movement among Predator fans to get Kline more time in Nashville. I remember that as well. But he just never quite fit in, Then you put him into a spot where you give him a different responsibility, and he just immediately blossoms into a great defenseman. I mean, that never would have happened if he was still in Nashville. So that's what you have to look at.
The price of defensemen on the market right now definitely is a factor. I mean, if you look, Fowler hasn't been traded yet, but everybody's assuming he's going to be traded. The rumor in Buffalo on Friday and even on Thursday and even as early as Friday afternoon was that Cam Fowler and the Sabres, that was a very possible deal.
Yeah.
And the asking price was the 8th pick overall. Now, the Sabres ended up not doing that. They took Alex Nylander with the 8th pick overall, and then they traded a couple draft picks and Mark Pysyk, a former first-rounder, to get Dmitry Kulikov, who's not as good as Cam Fowler. He's a different type of defenseman. But they did not want to give up that 8th pick at home in front of their fans. That would have been, Lou Lamoriello can do it in New Jersey. I don't think Tim Murray could do that in Buffalo.
But Lou did it for a goalie he knew would be a starting goalie in the league for 10, 15 years. We all knew he would be. And so I don't think he risked as much. That would be a bigger risk by Murray, I think.
Yeah. I would agree with that too. I think there is a good chance that Fowler ends up in Buffalo. That does seem to be what I've talked to people. It still does sound possible. But there are so many options right now, and this is because of also because of the expansion draft, which is playing into it a little bit. Not a lot yet, but it'll play into it much more at the trade deadline than it plays into it now.
All right. So let's stop it for a second though.
Yeah.
Fowler to Buffalo. Like, who are the offensive pieces that are going to Anaheim? It's not like Buffalo's loaded with offense.
Right. No, right, exactly. But Anaheim also doesn't want to take money back, so this is probably a prospect type deal, in all reality.
Well, it could involve a guy like Zemgus Girgensons, who's coming off his entry level deal, but
even if it shines off him a bit, it is.
Right. Oh yeah, and the reason why, Russ, is because apparently he just didn't fit with what system Dan Bilesma was implementing in Buffalo. I think he's a good young player.
When he goes to a less offensive system in Anaheim, how's that going to work out?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, true. The funny thing was, even though the team he played for was a 30th place team, Girgensons was one of the better players, and he showed an ability to play two-way, which you'd think would fit in Anaheim. So I wouldn't be, but I think it would take a lot more than Girgensons to get Fowler. It'd probably take a first-round pick or some really highly regarded prospect to get him to get Fowler out of Anaheim.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I mean, whether it takes, I don't know. I mean, you're not looking at a player. That's a good question. Does it take? It takes more than him, but not a whole lot more than him. I mean, that's about right. I think that's about right if you can make that trade, because what's happening? They're definitely desperate to move that cap space. They have to move that cap space.
Well, they're looking to sign Lindholm to an extension. So
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, let's talk. To me, the biggest move of the day was by the Red Wings to get rid of Pavel Datsyuk. I mean, to me, that was the craziest thing of the day, and the way they got rid of him, I think there was a lot of, I'm sure you guys were at the draft, a lot of wow, the Red Wings got, the Coyotes got fleeced in this situation or whatever, the Red Wings got away with murder.
Nobody said that.
Really?
Yeah, because of who they drafted. Once Jacob Chikrin got drafted, it was like, wow, this was a really great move by them.
No, they did. I mean, did they have to throw in that extra first-round draft pick? That was the big thing I was talking about, people, like going back the other way, because they knew Datsyuk had to be moved, and yet they gave that Rangers pick back to the Red Wings for next year. That's the one I wonder about. Like, it feels like to me, they could have got that done. Detroit was so desperate to make that move, and there were so few teams that could make that move. If I'm Arizona, I would have held out to not give up that pick.
I mean, Detroit, Arizona moved up, I think it was 4 slots, but they had to give up an extra second-round pick, and Detroit took on Joe Vitale, who apparently is not going to play again because of concussion problems. So that took a little bit of a haircut off the $7.5 million cap hit.
Right.
But I mean, I was surprised that Arizona had to give up a second-round pick. I mean, I see the benefit for them having Datsyuk, that's $7.5 million in cap space to get to the cap floor that they're not going to even have to spend $1 on. So that, in a way, that's a benefit for them, and they have a lot of flexibility. But I would have thought that they would have gotten who we talked about, a Polkinen, a Athanasiou, some player.
Jacob Chikrin in a spot where no one thought Jacob Chikrin would be.
That is the crazy part about it. I mean, besides
that's why I think it was good.
No, yeah. Besides this trade, I thought Arizona had a hell of a draft. I mean, they really had an amazing thing. And I thought this trade, the only thing I questioned was the one other pick going in, but just because of the desperate situation. But I think, man, when you look at who they got throughout the draft, it was impressive. And getting Chikrin there was just an absolute crazy. I mean, I was surprised, and we wrote about this, and I think you even said that you thought the Bruins made the right move by passing up on Chikrin, but I thought the Bruins were definitely going to take him. I thought that.
No, not when you could get McAvoy and watch him in your own backyard. I mean, it's so close to say who's better than whom. I think McAvoy is the better defender, and I think Chikrin has more offense, and I think the Bruins went for the better all-around guy. That's why I think they went for him.
Right. Right. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, you look at it when you look at the Bruins. I mean, they do like to take guys in their own backyard. They do love to watch those players play. There's nothing wrong with that. You did feel bad for Jacob Chikrin. It was his interview on TV was really kind of interesting just to see him talk. He was definitely upset about falling as far as he did. Yep. He was motivated. He said it would motivate him too. So there were some definitely that's going to be a great story to watch. And it does remind me a lot of the draft that I was at when Cam Fowler fell, of all people that we're talking about. Cam Fowler is the same kind of thing. I think Chikrin, like Fowler, will be a great player in the NHL. I think it'll work out very well for him.
I just think it's hilarious. And again, I keep going back to this, but Edmonton, in the midst of all these defensemen that were in this draft that I think are quality players, you can say, okay, Puljujarvi fell into their laps at 4 and they had to take him. No, they didn't. They really didn't. They need defenseman, and I think Sergachev would have been a more prudent, or Yalev.
Yeah, I thought about that too.
Or Yalev would have been a more prudent pick at 4. And, maybe they tried to trade down. There was talk about of some sort of 3-way deal that might have been what Columbus was involved in. I'm not sure, but they come out with a great young forward to add to that group of 5,000 great young forwards that they have. They still have a Mickey Mouse defense. And it's really until they bolster that blue line, and maybe they're going to try to do that with some trades. I mean, you mentioned Nugent Hopkins. I mean, I think you mentioned that Nugent Hopkins going to Minnesota. If it's
that was very close at the draft. And one of those things that got so close that you wonder if it'll happen now. Like if it didn't happen by now, it was close enough that it should have happened by now. So whether or not that falls apart or not, I mean, I think that there's a team. Edmonton could be a team that and they don't want to move Cam Fowler to Edmonton, I've heard, but at the same time, there's a great spot for Anaheim. You know, like Anaheim can look at that situation and say, okay, we can pick up somebody. You know, that the Anaheim would really use a player. You know, like a Nugent Hopkins or an Eberle or Yakupov, somebody like that.
But if Edmonton gets a Jonas Brodin for Nugent Hopkins in that deal, then okay, there's a defenseman that helps. I think he's a top 4 defenseman. But if nothing like that happens, and they have Yakupov and Eberle and all the players that they had coming back next year after there's been so much talk of Chiarelli making moves and reorganizing that core, you're that team finishing 28th or 29th place again, unless McDavid is just a god on the ice.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would have taken Juolevi like if I were the person making the pick, because I feel like that's the need and it's not that big a reach. But they probably didn't have Juolevi as high on the board. Sergachev probably wasn't as high on the board for them either, although Sergachev probably could play this year. But they didn't go there either. Maybe they looked at the combination of what McDavid can do with Puljujarvi and they said, okay, you know what, that's better than anything we have.
Yeah.
And I get that. But the idea is, yeah, you still have to really work at trading these other guys, and now everybody knows that you have to work at really trading some of these other guys. That's the problem.
I mean, McDavid, Puljujarvi, and Hall could be the top line for the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, that's insane. I mean, when you think about it.
But,
I mean,
it's like any other sport. If you have that, but you don't have a great defense, it's not going to be great.
Yeah, and their top pairing is Andres Sekera and Oscar Klefbom.
Right. No, they have to, but they have assets. They should. Edmonton should, quote unquote, should be able to fix this. They have the pieces to get defensemen in there. They have the pieces to make, to make a move. I would look at Mark Streit if I was them. I really would. There's players I would look at. They're just like experienced power play running defensemen like that. I would look all over the place to find. There are defensemen out there. They don't have to hit a home run with Shattenkirk or Fowler, but they have the ability to actually go out there and.
Yeah, but that's the road that they've gone down the last few years.
Not really. I mean, what defensemen have they traded for like that? I mean,
not traded for, but I'm talking about in terms of going out and signing on defense. They went the direction of signing a guy like Mark Fane.
No, but those aren't. That's nothing. I mean, compared to there's some players out there.
What I'm saying is traded Petrie. Like that's something I never understood.
Right. They had a player like that. They traded Petrie away. Right.
But
why did they trade Petrie?
But instead of going after impact defensemen in free agency, I mean, firstly they overpaid on Andres Sekera, who I think is a decent offensive defenseman, but not a difference maker. And then they went out and signed guys like Mark Fane and traded for Nikita Nikitin. It's like, I mean, that's the previous administration, and you can't hang that around Peter Chiarelli's neck. But until he does something, I'm wondering what the hell he's doing.
No, and I think Edmonton fans are the same way because we've been through a lot of these drafts now, and Edmonton is the biggest tease in the world. I mean, they talk to tons of teams. I don't know what that was. Hello.
Sorry.
That's okay, no problem. I mean, Edmonton talks to a lot of teams. They talk to a lot of teams every draft, and they never trade. They never make trades. It's incredible. They really don't. So Oilers fans are very frustrated by this, as you can imagine. I got a ton of them talking to me about it, about how frustrated they are by it. So, I mean, I think they have the ability to fix it. I think they had to take Puljujarvi. I mean, it's crazy. There's such a good player for them to fall. I mean, it never hurts to have another. I mean, they're not talking about. I mean, Puljujarvi on their depth chart right now maybe is third. Maybe goes to the third best or second best player they have right away. I mean, that's pretty crazy. I mean, right after McDavid, is it Hall and then Puljujarvi, or is it Puljujarvi then Hall? I mean, to me, those three are the top three on the Oilers. So that when you can get somebody on your top line, you got to go for it. I mean, you got to do it. I think. I mean, that they were stuck, but but it was interesting, and I know how much that if I do believe, I really do believe, and I talked to a couple people about this, that if Luc Dubois had fallen to them. Pierre-Luc Dubois, if he had fallen to them, that they would have made a trade with Montreal and picked up the defenseman. Like they, maybe gotten, maybe fallen because Montreal was completely about trying to trade up to get Pierre-Luc Dubois. That's what they were trying to do. So I talked to a lot of people about that a lot. So yeah, I mean, there are so many interesting twists and turns that went in this whole thing, and obviously, like we said, Arizona got stronger by a lot. I felt like New Jersey made a couple really good picks.
Well, I mean, I like Arizona's draft a lot. I mean, Keller and Chikrin, I mean, Keller was picked up at about the right spot at 7, and then to get Chikrin falling down the draft board at 16 is pretty good. The one thing, just mentioning Pugliarvi, it's again that's repeating the same formula when it comes to Edmonton. There's another 18-year-old kid going straight into the NHL. Maybe Chiarelli says, okay, maybe it's better for the long-term goal of this franchise to let him stay in Finland a year. I mean, I think he's ready for the NHL.
Yeah, he's ready.
But do you know what I'm saying, Zach?
No, I do know what you're saying because that's their history, right? But
yeah,
I think you can't look at it like that. I don't think in this situation. I think you have to look at it like it's every draft pick's its own animal. You have to look at it like this is an animal. You can't blame PRV for other things that have happened in the past. He's got to come in there and play.
You can recognize that what you're doing is you're putting 18 and 19-year-old kids into the sausage grinder of Edmonton, where all they're doing is losing. And you have to come to the realization, unless they're going to do something out of the box, do something different than they've done in the last few years, and move some players out to bring in impact players on the blue line or veteran players who can help those young guys. All you're doing is exposing another 18-year-old kid to the pressure and to that losing environment in Edmonton, and I just don't think that's a good thing for a guy like Pugliarvi.
No, it isn't, and you're right. But I think there's no reason to assume. I think there's two things you can assume of Edmonton, and I know we always get burned by Edmonton, similar to what we used to always say. We always get burned by San Jose, But this year they finally came through for us. But you always get burned by Edmonton by saying that they're not going to make that kind of move, and I think they are. I think they are going to make those kind of moves to get a couple. I think they are. They're ready now to move some of these guys.
So
right?
I couldn't easily figure out what Edmonton even got in return anymore for Petrie, because they got a second and a conditional 5th. But the second in 2015, they didn't draft the second in 2015. So then where'd that get traded to?
Yeah.
I don't know what the 5th this year turned into. It could have turned into a 3rd. And so, when you think about what they traded for Jeff Petrie, it wasn't worth it.
I think they knew that Petrie wouldn't resign there. I think they were stuck. I think he told them they weren't going to resign. He wasn't going to resign there. It had to be something like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, it probably was.
We're going to lose him for nothing and try to get the best we can get. Which is, and he resigned in Montreal pretty quickly. So that was he really wanted to play someplace else. But the other thing with Edmonton is I think you can assume Edmonton's going to be better because we always get in trouble for that. But last year they were better until McDavid got hurt. This year they'll be better if McDavid stays healthy and they add PRV and there is a and
again how much better really?
I mean they improved quite a bit. How many points did they improve from last year? It's quite a few points. I mean, in 1 year.
Don't matter. It's really what matters where you end up because
but they were close. I mean, you can't go from absolute horrible to the playoffs. I mean, they took a mid-range step last year that that got them 10 points closer or 15 points closer to the playoffs. There's still another 10 to 15 points to go. Right. But I think they can make that. I think if McDavid doesn't get hurt last year, they're a bubble team this year, and they would have been battling for the playoff spot. I don't think they would. So now a year more McDavid experience, Cam Talbot more, actually getting more comfortable in there. I think they're going to be a playoff-ish team. Whether or not they make the playoffs or not is another story.
And Russ, the second round pick that they got in the Petrie deal was flipped to the Rangers for Talbot. It was part of the Talbot deal.
So that's part of the Talbot. So then they lost that, and then they either picked up Dylan Wells or Graham McPhee with the extra conditional 5th, unless it got higher. They picked twice in the 5th, so that's probably the pick. And they're both pretty good players. I don't know if either of them are definite NHLers. I mean, so again, that's a tough return. Even though, like X said, hey, they knew he was going. When you trade someone at the deadline,
yeah,
so it helped pay a portion of Cam Talbot's freight. So I guess they probably feel like it's worth it. But to me, it's a little rough. We'll see how these kids work out. If one of the, if the kid makes it, then it would help it make it a lot better deal.
A lot better. One of the moves that went under the radar that I was surprised you didn't hear. I didn't get to listen to all of what you were doing, Russ. Of course, you did some great stuff on XM.
I didn't listen to myself either. I was on 4 hours straight.
You guys are always fantastic. That was, It was funny. There was one point during the day when I was listening to you and I was getting into it, but there was nothing happening. No trades were happening. Everything was sort of falling off, and my son comes in with a baseball glove, just like one of those moments out of like a Coke commercial. Hey, Dad, you want to have a catch? I'm like, So I was off. But you might have talked about this.
No, son, I'm tracking the third round of the NHL draft.
That's right. No, I've got to know where this kid from Belgium goes. No, I was no instead. So I did take a break in the middle of the day.
Glad you did.
And go to the beach. And Friday night was funny. My kids, just as a aside, my kids actually watched the draft. This is the first time they've ever done that with me. They got into it. They were following along. My daughter was like asking me all these questions, and she was watching the whole thing with me. Usually it's just me locked up in my office, but she actually did.
You know what? I wish my kids would have watched the draft with me. I mean, I wish as a kid I would have watched the draft with my dad rather than me watching like an old Western in black and white, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed, I mean, this is then another, Disney Channel marathon. She was watching stuff with me. It was pretty good. So,
well, I think I imparted this story once before, but whenever the draft comes around, I remember that St. Louis Blues draft in the early '80s. I think it was 1982, Russ. Maybe I'm wrong. When they didn't draft. When they didn't show up for the draft. I think Ralston Purina owned the team, and they decided they weren't going to the draft. And me and a friend of mine sent a letter to Ralston Purina, said, if you pay for our flight to wherever the draft is, and you give us the NHL draft guide, we will draft the team for you. And of course, the 15-year-old kids never got a response.
Oh well.
Yeah. Wow. So, but the one thing that went down, and I'm sure you talked about at some point, Russ, was the D'Angelo trade.
Yep.
That went, sending him from Tampa to Arizona. Another defenseman in Arizona picked up, and a sly little move, I think, because I think that kid is for real. I mean, I do
too. I was a little surprised. I kept hearing for a couple of days that they were down on D'Angelo, and I was like, well, what's to be down on? I know he had 40-something points, like 43 points in a rookie season in the AHL at the age of 20. He was a minus 18. Okay, so we know his defense isn't great. But we also know that the league has changed, and he's amazingly fast and very good with the stick and puck handling. Like, he's a wizard at times, and tremendous on the power play. It just seems like, for whatever reason, there was something else at play there with Tampa that they didn't like about the player, so they just dealt him. And it's like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, if he was, and I heard a couple other people were surprised about it around the league, and a couple of people who said, "Wow, we didn't know." This is one of the typical moves. We didn't know he was available. Like if he had been, if more teams had known, they might have gotten even more for him because.
And I believe, Russ, he would have been exempt from the expansion draft, so you can't say that they traded him because they thought he was going to get claimed. He's only had 1 year pro. He'll play again in the AHL or maybe in the NHL this year. It was just simply the fact that they didn't think he was going to turn out the way they thought he was going to turn out. But yeah, I mean that's a good move by the Coyotes because
it was 83 for the Blues, by the way.
83. Okay. I knew it was yeah. So we would have been 16 at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean it's a first round pick that we'll get a chance in Arizona. There's they have Goligoski, they have Ekman Larson, but there's some room for him to possibly make the team as a bottom pairing guy, or maybe just play with Arizona's AHL team and get another year of experience. And there was another deal like that between Columbus and Toronto that would happen about an hour after the draft, where Kirby Reichel was traded for Scott Harrington. And
that one's an interesting one. That one.
Yeah.
I like Harrington a lot. I know he could play defense, but I guess they sort of looked at him and said, maybe Babcock said, yeah, he doesn't fit in my system, so they trade him. Reichel, on the other hand, has all the tools, but I do have a little worry about his foot speed, so maybe that's like the last thing to sort of click for him because he was pretty dominant. He was a pretty dominant crease guy in the junior level. Definitely got big enough for the NHL, but you still got to be fast enough. And I think that's the only thing he's lacking.
Yeah, and there have been players that have gone to the Leafs that had a problem skating, and Barb Underhill, their skating consultant, has helped them out in terms of getting from point A to point B, so that maybe they can get an extra stride out of them. I mean, the thing is, and you notice by the draft that the Leafs, who they drafted, last year was a emphasis on skill, and it didn't matter how big the player was. This year, it was definitely size. It was definitely, the intangible of like going into the corners, rough and tumble. I mean, the kid that they drafted in the second round, Korshkov, the Russian, 6'4". They,
Not a
big.
rough and tumble player though. That's not his game.
No, but a big size and a possession guy.
Yeah.
And the thing is that and there was a trend this year, and I'm sure you guys noted it on your broadcast. A lot of overagers. Toronto.
Yeah, we can talk about a few.
Yeah, Toronto drafted 4 guys over the age of 18. Well, 2 of them are almost 20 years old, turned 20 years old in a couple weeks, and that's unusual. But a lot of teams are dipping into the players that they get a little bit more of an idea of what they are. And if and when the draft goes to 19 years old, which we've heard it might happen down the line, that's that's sort of like what you're going to see is these players get an extra year in junior or an extra year over in Russia, and then what you have, a little more what you have.
Yeah, Koroshev, the thing about him is, he's like 100 and I think he's 168 pounds right now, or 78 pounds at that size, maybe 180. I think actually 180, and he needs to gain like 20 pounds of muscle. But the funny thing about him is he's pretty strong. Like if he gets inside position now, he's hard to move off the puck. So you put 20 pounds on him, and you'll really have something. So he's going to take a few years, but I like the pick. I do. We did think they were going to go with a little more size, and they did, and that's fine. You still have to go with size and skating, and I still think, unfortunately, the height bias was on full display, other than the Clayton Keller pick in the NHL. DeBrincat, he falls to the Blackhawks.
That's the one. I mean, I was like, tell me it isn't a perfect place.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, that was I tweeted out about that. I tried not to be a fan, but just that's a player that I really wanted the Flyers to take a shot at because I'd heard they were interested in him. I was checking it. I've been told off the record that they were looking at him carefully.
Well, the Flyers did great because LeBarish fell to them after they made that deal.
Yeah,
so that was pretty good for them too. I don't think he'll score as much as DeBrincat, but LeBarish has great speed and probably better speed than DeBrincat. But again, he fell. Samuel Girard fell. There were, and any of the guys that, Abramov went to the 3rd round. Some people thought he was maybe a first rounder.
And Golashev went into the 5th round, which I was surprised at.
5'9", unless you were, 5'10", and Clayton Keller, you dipped in this draft.
Yeah, but you're right, Mike. About Chicago getting DeBrincat, though, you're absolutely right. That is the perfect team to get him. That is the,
Yep.
That's the team that can afford to do that. That's why Chicago. That's like a rich getting richer type scenario where the Chicago just has the ability to make that move and not worry about anything else.
Yeah. And why do I think maybe it's too much to ask for him to make the Blackhawks as an 18-year-old. But why do I have a feeling in a year or so we're going to see DeBrincat, Panarin, and Kane on the same line? And
I hinted at that on the show. I had DeBrincat on.
Yeah.
And I said, just out of curiosity, would it be okay to play with Patrick Kane someday? And he just had this big smile. And
he must have been so psyched to get drafted by that team. I mean, he knows that. He knows he's going to get a chance. He knows that that's the kind of team that doesn't care about his size. He knows that. Right. I mean, he basically replaces Teravainen right away in my mind. They move Teravainen, but they get him, and he, it's.
But they didn't know they were going to get him. That's the funny thing.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
No, I know they didn't know, and it's crazy, but they got him because of the attitude that team has versus other teams. Right. The bottom line is the Blackhawks, they trade away first round draft picks because they're at the point right now where they don't care about the draft as much. Then they have this feeling that they can go and get Panarins like whenever they want to.
I don't know if
I don't think it's true, but I think that there's an invincibility to them right now. They really feel like they can do no wrong. Chicago's in that spot.
I don't know if it's that they don't care about the draft because they traded Andrew Shaw, who was apparently asking too much money from them for 2 second-round picks, and one of the second-round picks was DeBrincat. So it turned out,
it's a crazy steal for them to do that too. I mean, that's as a Montreal Canadiens person too. Like I was so upset about picking up Andrew Shaw.
Put this out there, Mark Kelly is the director of amateur scouting for the Blackhawks. I think I deserve $1 every time I mention his name because I've mentioned it a lot in the last time we're doing this show. If you think about it, all the times.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, you're so right. I mean, but Andrew Shaw, Montreal picking up Andrew Shaw, that really rubbed me the wrong way.
He's a lovable player, Ak. Isn't he a lovable player?
God. I know. We're talking about a fan base that totally is very much into the kind of people their players are.
That's a Michel Therrien player. That's a guy who he will love. He will play him probably in the top 6.
Oh yeah, no, he's going to play all the time, and and God help us, he's going to play.
That's his David Clarkson.
Yeah, he is his favorite person. He's so overrated. He scores goals because he was. I'm going to be very curious about how many goals he's actually going to score now. Like, I really think that Shaw scored goals because he was on Chicago a lot of the times, and he played.
Remember, we all questioned Clarkson. He was scoring goals at the right opportunity in New Jersey.
Yeah,
and it never translated.
But they're talking about. I mean, the indications are they're talking about a 5 or 6 year contract for Andrew.
I know, and Clarkson's a good person on top of it all. We'll take that. I mean, Clarkson's a great person. He just didn't have enough to play. They were talking about a guy who's just we might not have enough to play, and is also not a great person on top of everything. So Shaw is, that's a really bizarre situation. That was staggering. It really was. I mean, I wasn't surprised they finally traded Lars Eller. They've been trying to trade Lars Eller for
but this was a great trade for the Capitals, because if you think about it, yes, they had to spend $2.5 million more, but they got the fourth-line center that killed them in the playoffs. It killed them as they advanced in the playoffs. With Richards giving them almost nothing, it really hurt them.
No, you're right. They have that now.
But they're spending money that would be normally allocated for a third-line center on a fourth-line center.
They still have prospects that can come up. Jacob Verana could come up. Riley Barber can come up. That's why they can do that.
Yeah, and they're going for it. I mean, they're fine tuning to win a Stanley Cup right now. They're at that point where they're at the fine tuning stage, right? So they make a trade there. They bring in a guy that fits, like you said, exactly why they lost to Pittsburgh, right?
Yep.
That's what they do. I mean, Mike Richards, by the way, I keep hearing he's going to end up in San Jose. Back with DeBoers, which is as their fourth line center. So keep an eye on that.
The old folks home in San Jose.
Have we not seen enough to say that he just doesn't have it anymore? I'm trying to be nice.
No, I know, but Pete DeBoers. He can play a
little PK, but is that enough?
I don't know. It depends on how DeBoers uses him, I guess.
Russ, you're talking about the organization that brought in Claude Lemieux and Jeremy Roenick.
No, but you know what? No, I'm not going to go there, because I have a lot of respect for the organization. I think they've scouted well, and I think they do good things. I think they're hoping to get something out of Richards. Maybe Richards is telling them to be back to hard training. I don't know, but I think there's just too much mileage on him.
No, I mean, I agree to your point. I mean, I think their organization has done well in terms of draft, in terms of finding prospects, and they have some young guys who are coming along. But
the Joel Ward pickup was great for them. He had like 22 goals for them.
But there is that history of bringing in these guys on their last legs. I mean, bringing in Rob Blake on his last legs. Jeremy Roenick and Claude Lemieux. They did that. So I think if they do sign him, that's another example of that.
You have to be really careful in the Western Conference not to think that you've made it. To me, that's the problem. The Sharks have to realize that.
Doug Wilson's not like that, though. He really is. And if you think about it, he's a pretty down-to-earth guy. He really is. I don't think.
No, I agree with that. No, I do agree with that. What I mean is in general, usually what happens when a team goes to the Stanley Cup Finals is that team says, okay, we're going to fine tune and tweak because we got to the Stanley Cup Finals. We're the best team in the conference. In the West, no one's the best team in the conference. They can. And you have to still try to get better. You can't just sit there and think if you stay the same you're going to be okay. You're not. The Sharks still have to improve their team. They can't just sit there and expect that to happen again, because a lot of things fell in their lap the right way. A lot of matchups fell in their lap the right way.
Another year or so they'll have Timo Meier in their lineup. They're okay.
No, yeah, for sure. They need to be smart about it. Chris Johnson on Twitter put out a list today of the Tampa Bay players who've received qualifying offers, which was kind of interesting. It was basically all of them.
Yeah.
Gord, Gudlevskis, Kaloran, Kucherov, McGinn, Nemistikov, Nesterov.
Not Marchessault. Not Marchessault.
Well, who cares about that?
Not who?
So you're telling me Kucherov did not get that 6-year deal that Mike said he was going to get?
Not yet.
Qualifying offer doesn't mean he's not going to get the deal. Give me a break. He's going to get the 6-year deal, especially after Philip Forsberg signs 6 years, $36 million. Kucherov now can say, "Hey, buddy, look at that. Give me that."
Why he's not getting it. They're going to make him do it.
Philip Forsberg signed a 6-year deal for $36 million, and
think about this. Think about it.
That's also happened, by the way. We're going to talk about that next.
Sorry.
The reason he's not going to get that deal is because they're going to make him prove that he can do it again before they.
He proved it. He's proved it.
How many years, Mike?
2.
Well, 2's not enough in my eyes.
Brandon Saad, I mean, how many years did Brandon Saad do it before he got the big money? That's the reality is in the NHL right now.
Not for everybody. That reality is with some teams.
Well,
Eisman generally doesn't do that, so we'll see if he does do that. Right?
I'm with you. No, I'm with you, and I think
that kind of mentality is going to lose him Steven Stamkos because that's what, at least that's what I think.
I don't know that plays into it. In this case, but I think that I do agree with what you're saying, Russ, and I do see what Mike's saying too. But I think that this is definitely a sign of, some of these guys are probably going to be arbitration players or what have you and stuff like that, right?
Yep.
And they could end up paying a lot for them anyway. And when you go to arbitration, you end up negotiating. You could end up with these long contracts as it is.
You don't. I mean, generally, you're not getting a 6-year deal out of arbitration. No one's getting that.
No.
Right. Not but we've seen it happen. I mean,
Well, Kucherov's coming out of entry level, so he's not going to get arbitration. There is the potential here for a holdout if they. What? Let me finish. There's a potential for a holdout if they're playing a hard line and saying we're going to give you a 2-year bridge deal at $2 million, and he says, okay, I'm going to the KHL, kiss my butt. There is a possibility of that.
There's a 0% chance of that.
Okay.
And people don't want to play in the KHL for the most part, unless you're Alexander Radulov.
You can't use the KHL for leverage anymore. I mean, it's just look what happened with Alexander Radulov. He tried to come and extort a team. No one gave him any money. He went back to the KHL. You can't use it as leverage anymore.
He actually used the NHL as leverage, to be frank. I mean, he
probably did. Yeah.
He did. That was the opposite situation, right? But he never wanted to come over here. I mean, that's what we saw.
Look, if you would have paid him $5 million, he would have come.
Yeah, but he knew that nobody was going to give him that too. So he ran into he was really in a situation. This of course leads into the Steven Stamkos discussion, which we're not going to talk about too much today because we've got plenty of other things to talk about.
Because honestly, there's not much
to argue about.
Because honestly, there's not much to talk about right now.
Well, this is the closest thing we have to Stamkos news, and the why I bring this up is because this does show a little bit of Tampa's hand here. This is not what we've heard here is that Stamkos, and I talked to another source today, and there is no news. And actually, I'll tell you frankly, if you hear any news, the team's probably going to be out of it because I've heard that there's such a news shutdown on Stamkos that.
And to that point, Eck.
Yeah.
If that's the case, write off the Buffalo Sabres because all Tim Murray did after Saturday at the first Niagara Center, he came out and was like, "Well, we can offer them the the geography, the big fish."
That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is people aren't going to talk about the actual meetings that they have with Stamkos. It's okay to sit there and say we're going to make Stamkos an offer. We're in the Stamkos thing. Teams have said that. Detroit has not denied they're in the Stamkos thing. Toronto has not denied they're in. This is, and for Murray to say that, that's fine. That's not. He's not doing anything there. It's if you say a meeting went really well with Steven Stamkos or something like that. That's when you get in trouble. I think how this plays out.
But look, like the Rangers aren't saying anything, and they're probably going to offer him something too. So there's teams playing coy about it too.
Yeah, for sure.
All of a sudden, teams that have never been on the radar are all of a sudden coming out. Like Boston is in on Stamkos. Yeah. Vancouver is in on Stamkos. Do I buy it? No, I don't.
Well, there are some teams that will. Like for Boston right now, they need to create some excitement for their fan base too. I mean, they will be in on him. Not expecting to get him. I've seen this happen before. We've seen this happen.
I was told though, Eck, and you were right about this, that there won't be a Newport Sports open house for teams for Steven Stamkos.
There will be?
No, it won't be.
There won't be. Yeah, good. I can't imagine. I can't imagine that would happen.
But I'm wondering whether this is going to be like I don't think when we're doing our July 1st free agent frenzy show at 11 a.m. on Friday that we're going to that we're at 12:01 we're going to be announcing Steven Stamkos.
No, I don't either.
I think it's going to last into next week.
God help us. But yes, I think you're probably true. You're probably right about that. But
I think it's going to the middle of July. How about that? I do.
I don't. All right, we should do that as a poll. We should do that.
I don't think it will, Russ, for one simple reason. There are so many teams in a holding pattern right now for Stamkos. I will bet anything that all of them are saying, extend you our best offer, but we need to resolve this rather quickly. You're going to have to make a decision by.
You forget about one thing. Why should he care about that? He may want to see what those teams are going to do.
Right. He doesn't care about that. That's exactly right. And we've seen this happen before. That could drop some teams out of it. Some teams might be we need a decision by next day, but that could drop some teams out of it. I'm going to use the Kevin Allen theory of inconveniencing us as reporters to tell you when this thing will get signed.
Yep.
Which means that he will get signed on July 4th. That's when it'll happen because it'll happen on the 4th of July in America.
A lot of reporters want to take their summer vacation, and they'll be sticking around until Stamkos gets signed.
Right. So the fact is, I've got my mom's 70th birthday party on the 4th of July, and I will be having to do this. I can tell this is what's going to happen.
Well, the other thing is something I learned over the weekend. I roomed with a couple of Finns, and they have a thing called this midsummer celebration, and I can't pronounce the word, right?
Yeah.
And basically, people they start peeing over their boats, and they just start doing ridiculous things, and about 30 people a year die.
Jeez.
And so they've already, even when we were there, they were already clocking a few casualties, and this is a normal thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Speaking of the herd.
Crazy. Peeing over your boats. Man, that sounds like a weekend in Ocean City to me. Yeah, that's that's nuts. No, I think it'll be the 4th of July. The Parise and Suter were the 4th of July. I'll never forget that. As long as that, those two they signed on the 4th of July, same kind of thing. Because we do a big picnic on the 4th of July on the beach. I do a big cookout. I do this whole thing. It's a blast. All my friends, and this year we're doing it with my mom's 70th birthday. It's a huge deal. So it'll definitely be the 4th of July.
But wait. You're basically telling us we're not your friends, right? Because we've never been there.
Oh yeah, no, you're not my friend.
At least you said it. All right, hey,
Absolutely.
move on.
No way.
Thanks a lot.
I pretend to like you guys every day at 1 o'clock. No, that's not true. No, but I think that I think what we'll see. I think I honestly will go on a limb and I'll say it'll get done on July 1st. I really do. I think it will actually get done on July 1st. I know a lot of people are saying it's going to go longer, but I think that this will be figured out this week. I think Stamkos, and the kind of person he is, he's not going to want to drag this on. He is hating this. He's hating the whole publicity of it already, I'm sure. He just wants this to be done. He'll figure it. He will be coming up with, they can't officially negotiate, but what what does that mean? It's the craziest thing. If you can visit with somebody, you can talk to them, you have lunch with them. How can you not talk numbers with them?
What it means is, Stephen, we can't offer you specifics, but the range that we're going to offer you is between $10.99 million and $11.01 million. Somewhere in that range is our offer, but we can't offer you a specific number.
There's a player named Feven Hamkos that we're looking at. We're considering signing Feven Hamkos to a 25 million. It's just that's when you have these. It used to be the funniest thing that used to happen during this week. Now I'm so glad they actually went away because this week has always been such a sham. But during this week before, this was a lot of fun to cover because you would see players negotiating for their friends with teams, their players who are on the team already, and say, I know so and so, and I wonder if your friend so and so would be interested in a $5 million deal. I'm not just curious. I'm I know you. I'm not going to talk with him directly, but will your friend be interested? And you would hear that person go back and talk to his friend and say, hey, my friend said he was interested in playing on a team like this for a $5 million deal. He said something, and that's what happened. And so now that doesn't happen anymore. But now at least they're a little bit more open about it. And then players did visit other cities during this time too. I remember a couple times that happened. I remember who was it that got caught doing it? Somebody got caught doing it in Vancouver one time. They were just and in this day and age, the one thing that I do believe is that we are, within the next 24 hours, going to have a social media outlet report a picture of Steven Stamkos somewhere that we're surprised by. It's going to be here he is in the Detroit airport or something like that. Not just.
Oh, yeah.
That's got to happen because you just can't, in this day and age, go around the world and not be caught by 1,000 cameras looking at you, right? So
I wish we could just type it in Google Earth, just type in Steven Stamkos in Google Earth and just know where he is.
Yeah, well, I once had a beer with him, and in that beer I put a little tiny tracking device, so I've been able to track Steven Stamkos this entire time.
Well, no, based on what happened last year, if we can track the MLS&E plane going to Tampa to pick him up.
I remember that. Oh my word!
And that my friend Jeffler was the one who discovered that. If we track the MLS&E plane and it's taken off from the Tampa airport at some point, then I think we know where he's going.
Right, the MLSE flight plans are not available this year.
Again, you you forget who is there, Lou will drive, just so no one can track it.
Lou will put Stamkos in the back of a Dodge Dart.
Yes.
And drive him somehow. Like,
great. By the time he gets to Toronto, he'll have suffocated.
I know that. I mean, he'll be like, or he'll dress him up like a woman and bring him in or something like that. I mean, Lamoriello. I don't put anything past Lou Lamoriello.
Well, okay. Well, one of the most interesting things, and maybe just to me, but getting to the arena at about 7:45 on Saturday for the draft, and the entire floor of the First Niagara Center was empty, except for the Toronto Maple Leafs table. Everybody was on hand, and Lou was sitting at the table 2 hours and 15 minutes before the draft had started. It's
right.
And I talked to a reporter, and he says, Lou's in the building at 7 o'clock in the morning every morning. It's like, okay, but what was the purpose of that? That's just Lou. That's what he does. He's got a work ethic that's ridiculous, and the team is following that example.
I wonder if he has a room. He used to have a room in New Jersey. In his office in New Jersey, he had a room.
Yeah.
Remember that you heard about this, Russ, right? There was like a separate room, like a door. Don't go in that door. No matter what you do, that door is not allowed to be entered. And it was like we wondered what was on the other side of that door. It was just like, okay, that is like is that where Lou sleeps in the building? That's what my theory was. Like he had a bed in there. But that room was like a crazy thing of mythology around the Devils. It was always the thing.
What Lou will do is maybe there'll be 3 planes that look like the MLSC plane, and they'll fly in 3 different directions to 3 different cities.
It's going to be like Marine One after 9/11. They had 4 helicopters flying into.
Like bringing Nixon into China, right? It's like we got to get what are we doing here? Like this is just like. At what point? I mean, the funny thing is, we all thought this signing period would be a period where teams would use to their advantage of creating buzz, to try to sell season tickets. Like we're bringing in so and so to show them this, bringing in so and so, and it's funny that hasn't actually happened at all. Like we haven't seen that happen at all. And
can we bring up a short subject, because I don't think there's a chance in hell of any of them happening, which is offer sheets, because I know that after the 5 p.m. deadline today for restricted free agents, everybody's speculating that guys like Seth Jones are going to get offer sheeted. I don't know how many times I can say the day of the offer sheet is dead. It's not happening.
Well, this year it is. I mean, because basically for an offer sheet to happen, you have to have a bigger increase in the salary cap than $1 million. I mean,
we have to start with the Hockey Hall of Fame argument now, because we won't have enough time.
Yeah, let's do that real fast, because we are running out of time.
And we have to do it because there's no way of talking about this and not having a disagreement, because it always happens. It's not because of us; it's the world.
No, but Eric Lindros, Hockey Hall of Fame. I put it out there, and I'm going to find the results. Put out a poll, but it's been really interesting. But what are your thoughts on Eric Lindros, Russ?
Yeah, I think he gets in. I think he has mended all fences, because I know that was a part of it. I think he's a point-of-game player. I think he was dominant to the point where if you didn't like his team, you hated him. Not saying that was me. I'm just saying people like me. He was a fantastic player, and he deserves to get in, and I would put him in. I think even Bobby Clark would vote for him now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Surprisingly close on Hockey Buzz. 2,841 people voting. 58% say Eric Lindros should be in the Hall of Fame. I thought it would be bigger than that. But
I think he should be in, and I think he falls under the the Kirby Puckett, Cam Neely exemption of a player whose career ended because of injury much too early. Yep. And Pavel Bure is another example of that. Yep. He was the best player in the league for, I'd say, a span of maybe 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Until concussion problems really kicked in. And honestly, he was a dominating power forward. So I don't see. I understand the reasons why he was pushed back. Personal things that's happened with other people before, but it's about time. And I think there are other players that.
Mark Recchi, I think, is another one, right? Mark Recchi, I think, is a definite in the Hall of Fame, and people don't.
You all think he's a definite. I think he is too, but I've spoken to people at the draft that don't believe he's a definite or even a first timer, and I think for some reason he's not going to get in first time, even though we all would say he should get in.
I think Dave Andreychuk's going to get in. One of the names that seems
he should get in first time too. Yeah.
One of the names that seems to be popping up is Doug Wilson.
Yeah, I don't think I'd put Doug Wilson in.
No.
Dave Andreychuk's look, Wilson was a terrific player. I don't want to poo-poo it because he really was a terrific player. Andreychuk's a tough one because I guess look, he's a compiler a bit. He did win the cup. He was a huge factor in winning the cup.
1,300 points. I mean, that's.
I know, but he was in an era where points were plentiful.
Yeah, but he scored.
Partially, but he was only partially in that era. He was partially not in that era too. He was in a lot. He was also in the New Jersey Devil Hell era too. So he was in there too.
And he scored 50 goals twice with Toronto. I think the Toronto writers will be on his side, which helps.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I'll put him in. I would put in Andrew Chuck.
What about
I think get back to Recchi for a second. I just think that Recchi won Stanley Cups with what?
Listen, I know, but I'm surprised.
No, I know. I agree with you because the thing with Recchi is, and I talked to people about it, is the fact that he played with Lemieux and he played with Lindros. Those are like so he played with two big players that But
that's the Steve Larmer argument that he played with Denny Savard, so that's the reason why he hasn't got.
But Larmer never had 125 points. I mean, it's like Recchi put up some numbers that were just insane.
And in Philly, he put up huge points too, and still.
The all-time leading point getter for a single season in Philly is still Mark Recchi.
I just had this feeling it's not going to happen, but I would do it. I would do those three.
I think Lindros and Recchi going in would be great. I think Pat Quinn's going to go in as a founder. That's what I've heard.
Yes, Quinn should go as a founder, and I think it should be Recchi, Andrew Chuck, and Lindros. But I just have a feeling it may not be.
It would be a big Hall of Fame trip for Flyers fans if that all happened. Because with Quinn, Lindros, and Recchi, they're three major Flyers factors. Brent Fedek, does he have any chance at making the Hockey Hall of Fame?
What about
he's the other side, the other part of the Crazy Eights line with Lindros?
Maybe.
Lindros and Recchi.
What about Jeremy Roenick?
Okay, Jeremy Roenick is definitely one of the greatest American players of all time.
Yeah.
I don't know if he did enough away from the NHL to put him in, and so right now I can't put him in. Maybe I'll change my mind, but he would come up a little short.
He's right on the bubble. Right on the bubble for me.
Yeah.
I think he should be in there. I do. I think because, like you say, he is one of the greatest American players ever to play the game. And you always wonder though about like people who have careers after, and we become more familiar with, like Roenick, Doug Wilson too, to a degree. These players who have careers after hockey that are within hockey still. So like Roenick's on television, Wilson's been a GM.
I hope for his sake that Mike Milbury is not a voter.
Yeah, I think it hurts. I think it actually hurts people when they have a career after hockey. I think it actually, in my experience, the more familiar you are with them, the less they can carry that aura with them that they had when they played. That we're really so familiar with Roenick now. And
what if he swindled a couple of the voters in poker? Would they hold?
Yeah, but again, a couple of the things Jared said, the controversial things he said recently, I think that does play into it, and that shouldn't, but it does.
Well, and the goalie question, Cujo, Tom Barrasso, Chris Osgood, any of them have a chance?
Nope. They're so tough on goalies now that you have to be like Dominik Hasek to get in, literally.
That's ridiculous. And
I know, but that's how the voting's been going.
You know what I heard somebody on XM today say something that was really, just to throw an old name in there that I thought was really good, and that was Rogie Vachon is not in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Like something to bring somebody like that in.
The kid in me wants Rogie Vachon to go in.
Yeah.
But the adult in me knows that how these voters work, and I'm going to say no way.
I mean, did he have a good enough career to deserve to be in there?
I think he did, but I haven't looked at his numbers. Let me look at him. I don't know.
Such a legendary person in our minds,
I actually think Cujo has better numbers than he does.
He's the goalie, that you just associate with an LA Kings team that was really terrible for a long time.
They were really terrible, and again, but he was also a Canadian for a short time too, right?
Yeah, but I really think.
And he won a Stanley Cup in I think '68 with the
right.
Yeah, I just will always think of him as a king. I don't know, maybe that's me, but. He played there for such a long time, and that Kings team.
17 years.
Yeah.
How many years?
17.
17 years as a goalie. That's pretty crazy.
Here's the thing. I'll tell you. Here's a good thing right off the bat. The 355 wins were really hard for him to get.
Yeah, they were. I mean, that's why I think I don't know. I don't think he's going to get recognition, but I think that's interesting when a player like that comes up at this point in time. It's funny because the last couple seasons in the Hockey Hall of Fame, we have had like these no-brainer Hall of Fames. We've had these things of these big-time players that go in. A lot of the Oilers team has gone in the last couple years. Like the Glenn Andersons of the world, stuff like that.
Yeah, he won the Vezina in '68. He had 31 wins that year, and like Mike said, a championship. He won a cup. He's won 2 cups. But I think he still, for whatever reason, nobody remembers that he played with the Canadians. Like even when you just opened up with him, you were talking about the Kings, and then I mentioned the Canadians. You know, like I think.
Yeah, I think of him as a king. I mean, I think
I know. I think that's hurting him.
that epic, mask that he had. He's really like kind of one of those epic type players.
The purple jersey with the actually it was a queen's crown and not a king's. But
I'm gonna look up Curtis Joseph and see because
the Red Wings have made a big signing. They've picked up a big forward. We were expecting this. This is kind of surprising. They didn't. I don't know if they acquired his rights first or not, but the Red Wings have indeed signed Drew Miller to a. No, just kidding. But that was
All right, so Cujo has not won a Vezina. He won a King Clancy. No championships. How many wins? 454 wins in 6, 11, 14, 16, 18, 19-year career.
Yeah, I don't think that, I think I'll take Vachon over him.
I would put Vachon over him, even though the wins is a lot. Even though he has a lot more wins.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, and they were impressive. I mean, they were impressive wins, like you said. A lot of that time was with a team that Kings team was horrible for a while there, and
now here's the thing: he was in second in Vezina voting once, third in Vezina voting twice, once fourth, once fifth. So he was in the mix.
Who, Cujo?
He was fourth in Hart voting, but he just never won an award. I mean, he did win the King Clancy. That's the only award he won.
Yeah. I mean, he was a great goalie, but I think if Cujo had just spent his whole career in St. Louis...
Look, now we hurt Mike's feelings. I looked at it objectively, Mike. I like Curtis Joseph. It's not happening. I'm sorry.
I don't know. I think that if we had,
I'm still gonna withhold hope, just like I'm gonna withhold hope that Keith Hernandez and Don Mattingly will eventually make the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Man, well, that'll be fun to watch. In about 40 minutes from now, we'll know who's in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
We'll know in like 40 minutes. I'll be on a conference call later, and
3:00 today. So we'll check it out for sure, and we'll be back again tomorrow with more of this speculation that we can throw, with all the speculation we can throw at the wall.
Tomorrow I'm getting a couples massage. I can't do it.
Oh, shut up. Really? Wow. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. We'll talk to you soon. Where's my friggin' thing to stop this podcast?